Great. Okay, so it's my great pleasure to introduce Rick Hoge, who's the director of the Human MRI program at the Neurology at McGill. Is now the proud owner of a new Siemens Terra clinical scanner and was able to visit this past summer. So Chris was a postdoc and faculty member here at the Martinos Center during the early days. During the early days of the SEPTI effort, and while he is well known for seminal work on calibrated BOLD and flow metabolism coupling, in Bay 5 he was famous for acquiring these gorgeous 70 ASL data that for many years the printouts were still hanging on the walls there for everybody to see. And so we're really happy that Rick was able to join us today. Thank you for coming. Thanks.
So good morning, everybody. Sounds like the voice is coming through. Like you say, it is heavily gated. As John said, it was a real privilege back in the day. I was the ASL and calibrated MRI geek, so I had the honor of doing some of the first ASL scans on the system. Everybody here, I'm sure, knows what ASL is. You label blood in the neck. Does this have a laser pointer? It does. You label blood in the neck, you image slices in the brain, and you get images of the labeled blood that flows up. So 7T offers some clear advantages in terms of getting a high image quality in ASL. ASL is well known to be an SNR-starved technique. As the blood travels up through the neck artery, through these arteries, after labeling, the tag decays away with T1, which is prolonged at 7T. So there are many evident advantages to being able to do it, but also quite a few challenges. In the pulsed ASL techniques, which were what we used at the time, arterial spin labeling makes use of the ability of MR scanners to do spatially selective labeling. So these show some image slices flipped on their side to show an inversion band, so you can see the zero crossings. So this the signal in here, which would correspond to the neck area, is inverted some distance below the slice that you intend to image. So these are images that are required at 3T, which this is fairly easy to do because the dielectric effects are, while not completely absent, they're much less extreme than they are at 7T. You can see some shading in the images, and you can see some non-ideal aspects in the, this is it's supposed to be a saturation band here in the imaged region, which actually shows some imperfections in the center. It's not quite down at zero. These are bottles of distilled water that were put in there, and we reduced the delay time between all of the preparation pulses and the readout to zero. So basically, it's a pretty faithful capture of what was imprinted on the, in the case of a human, what will be imprinted on the neck. So sequences. In 2003, when the 7T was looking for additional applications, the pulse sequence we were using for arterial spin labeling was the PCOR Q2 tip sequence, which performed quite well at 3T. And I have to say, what we did was pretty much transplant it very brute force onto the 7T. We got some help from Dib Bolar and other people in the 7T group adapting it so that it would run. We used the infamous NCAP TEM coil here. You can see all the tuning capacitors around the back, and I still remember lying on the floor and having the Wiggins boys tweak capacitors and things in order to tune this thing up. As some of the guys before have shown, the EPI was pretty decent on this. They show a set of EPI scans at 2004 at 1.5 millimeter resolution. Clearly this is, it's possible to do much better than that, but for ASL being so SNR limited, we didn't want to push it too much. One of the, these horrible dielectric effects, we turned these into a positive, thinking that because there's a pronounced hotspot around the circle of Willis, it would be easier to achieve adiabicity. So when you do these inversion prepulses, they're adiabatic prepulses. You need to have your B1 meet a minimum threshold. So in a certain sense, the B1 hotspots that we get around the center of the brain were viewed as an advantage in achieving adiabatic conversion in ASL. Initially in the brute force transplantation of this, we were used to using it in ASL because it's so noisy. We tend to use very thick slices, which obviously doesn't work at 7T. You can see the extent of these susceptibility dropouts around the sinuses. And there's also some of these nonlinear distortions that other people have mentioned. Certainly, although this is 2004, the group was capable of doing much better EPI than this at the time, but it does show what kinds of things were being acquired. So we put all this together. This is the infamous ASL subtraction image that was acquired. And it was really striking to be able to see such a clean depiction of the cortical ribbon, which was really impossible to get on a 3T scanner in any kind of reasonable imaging time. It happened that this was a functional acquisition. My interest at the time and still is in doing functional imaging with quantitative MR acquisitions. So we had the individual, of course there was no stimulus presentation capability back in, this was 2004, but we had the person doing a voice cued, maybe we're probably flipping the light switch to cue them to do a motor task. So we were able to pick up hand motor activation in the appropriate side, both the perfusion and BOLD scans. So we published this at the time in an ISMRM abstract that including co-authorship from the people who really did the heavy lifting on this, I have a selection of, I'm going to keep my talk fairly short so that we can keep on schedule, but I have a selection of other images from around that time that fit in with what you've been shown in the other talks. Some of these early T2 scans, 0.4 millimeters in plane, still working on the homogeneity. This is back from 2003, so it's a year earlier. Again, the MP Rage showing the artifacts that were prevalent there. Some early time of flight that was acquired at 0.4 millimeter isotropic. So again, the potential of these systems is much, much higher than this, but it's a bit of a snapshot of what we were working on and trying to achieve back at that time. So I'll fast forward to, I think it's worth segueing into the present, and you look at all the work and all the creativity that was applied to this 20 years ago. Another very privileged point in my career has been to be involved in bringing the first Terra to Canada. And this is a picture of the group. Some of the old faces from Martinos, Christina here, and some of my Canadian Siemens colleagues, Gerald Moran, our collaborations manager, as well as M&I colleagues, Dave Rudko, a new recruit, Sebastian Deval, he's Siemens line manager for Siemens Canada, and Julien Doyon and Amir Shmuel, who are colleagues at the M&I. So 2017, we finally, after Christina will remember, a very interesting commercial process, finalizing the purchase contract for the 7T in this interesting space that we were granted. That I think one of our firsts is that we have right underneath this is a very sensitive facility for housing transgenic mice. It's a really advanced housing facility where there's millions of dollars invested in this. So we had to be very creative with the shielding. And just like in Bay 5, you had to excavate to lower the magnet. We ended up having to raise the magnet by about a meter in order to have the thing inside a fully enclosed 6-sided steel box. But anyway, thanks to a lot of teamwork and trust and other good stuff that prevailed, we're able to get this installed. It's 2019. This is our new Terra installation. It's a bit of a plug for us. None of this would be possible without people like Doug and Franz and Larry and Andreas and Christina and and the vision of people like Bruce and Larry. So anyway, it's just this is a wonderful opportunity this day for me to look back and see what the foundations of all of this are. So at the M&I is a storied institution in Canadian neuroscience, and so we have a very energetic communications department. So we had to be able to say this was the first of something, even though, as you know, it's probably about the 100th MR system in the world. So and London, Ontario, Ravi's group at Robarts has is really an established leader in ultra-high field MRI, both worldwide and in Canada. So we couldn't say it's the first 7T MRI. So we adopted, as those of you who went to our symposium know, it's the first whole body 7T MRI in Canada. This is the official wording that's as endorsed by our communications people. So anyways, it's a wonder, pardon me? So if you look closely, you can see we're first thirst. Anyway, so nothing, no limit to what the marketing people can come up with. But it's again, I had to congratulate everybody involved, both in the early stages of this project and in the translation of it to a clinical and commercial product. Looking back at these old images, it's amazing to be able to look at. This is the very first after the installation guys left. And we had a lot of crappy images of pineapples because the dielectric effects are horrible in the pineapple. This is the very first image. We popped somebody in. We hadn't even had applications training in. And so it's not the best 7T image in the world or anything. But what's remarkable is it's brought one of our techs over. It was like operating a big Prisma. So while it's not absolutely because of cost and other things, it's not just another 3T. It's incredible to see how far this has gone, and really exciting to see what clinician researchers throughout the world, and certainly our own institution, are going to be able to do with this device. Again, it's not. This is our first functional MRI scan that we did just out of the box. It's nothing particularly high resolution, but to be able to do this kind of stuff immediately right out of the box, literally within days of having it commissioned, is a great achievement by everybody involved in this. So it's not a long talk. I think I close up by acknowledging everybody in the group, Bruce, my postdoc supervisor, Larry, all the people I learned so much from on the physics side, Larry, Joe, Christina, Chris and Graham, Doug, and being able to interact with the Siemens guys was also a real privilege. And the time at Martinos was just fantastic. So thanks very much for the chance to come and speak here, and it's wonderful to see everybody.